Happy Tuesday to you, disappointed Dolphin fans. Welcome to another edition of the Miami Herald's Dolphins In Depth. I'm your host, Omar Kelly. Joining me is Barry Jackson from Cell Block 39. Barry is one of the media members who is peppering Mike McDaniels with questions about play calling. Will he maintain play calling?
Oh, no, that wasn't me.
It wasn't you, but
that was somebody else who will stay unnamed.
Oh, you don't have to stay unnamed. It's Marcel. You know what? Let me say this right now on Marcel's behalf and on every media member's behalf. Right now, fans on Twitter are inundating us, calling us a weak media contingent. We are asking piss poor questions, Barry, not calling this coach to the carpet, not demanding Chris Greer's job. This team is a disaster, and we are not holding them accountable to these fans. And how dare you question whether Marcel should ask if Mike McDaniel has considered
Well, Marcel was fine to ask it. Marcel was fine to ask it. Just to me, it's not a concern. To me, he's the best qualified person in the building to call the plays. Maybe Darrell Bevel would do a good job, but I would stick with McDaniel at that. It's McDaniel's personnel decisions with Greer that have cost him more than his play calling. Obviously, we can say they should have run more the other day. We could have picked out plays in individual games like the snow game in Buffalo. He should have run more late. But to me, the bigger problem is McDaniel is not going to McDaniel's not going to be given any player on offense he doesn't want no more, right? And so his selection of quarterback, obviously with Mike White and now going with Skylar Thompson, he's every bit as accountable as Chris Greer for that poor decision. So to me, it's been McDaniel's personnel decisions that have been the bigger issue than his coaching.
Hold on, Barry. Hold on. I challenge you with that because you know who I'm holding responsible for the personnel on the team? It's Chris Greer. You know who determines who the backup and how much that backup's going to be offered? It's Chris Greer. Yes, Mike McDaniel has to look over these quarterbacks and check them off, yes or no. But ultimately, and I said this in the offseason, and I'm not this huge Jimmy Garoppolo is going to save the team, save the world. But when Jimmy Garoppolo was out there as a free agent, he was facing a 2-game suspension. He's basically a minimum salary player. They said instead of dumping Mike White and adding Jimmy Garoppolo, we're good with what we have. Me and you both saw with our own eyes that Skylar Thompson outperformed Mike White during training camp, OTAs, exhibition season. So let's not question whether Skylar deserved to be the number 2 quarterback because he clearly won the job. Now, what we can question was his preparation, his execution, his understanding of what the assignment was. Because if I'm running Mike McDaniel's offense as I'm not clearly, but as a quarterback for this offense, the number one thing that you need to do is stay on schedule. And Skylar Thompson was probably on schedule for about 20 to 25% of his plays. And that doesn't even give your team a chance to win the game. Not that's factoring in penalties, factoring in the O-line play, factoring in mishaps and wrong routes. If your quarterback cannot stay on schedule, you have absolutely no chance. And that's what we saw against Seattle.
And can't feel pressure either. I mean, he was ill-equipped for the job, and it's unfortunate. He's a good guy.
You're going to go with ill-equipped for the job?
Yes, he was ill-equipped to be put in that position. Now, he won the job in camp, more so a result of Mike White's inadequacies than Skylar Thompson being great. Skylar Thompson was pretty good in camp. He had a very good game against Tampa. But when you see him in NFL action, there's never been anything other than the fact that he's a gamer and he has a strong arm. There's never been anything, Omar, that's left me with the impression that this guy can be an extended stay, not extended stay America, but extended stay starter, filling in for your injured starter. And I think that was proven again. He just doesn't process information quickly enough. He's skittish in terms of not wanting to set up and plant because he sometimes feels and hears ghosts when there aren't ghosts. Other times he doesn't feel the pressure enough. And he's just probably, if you were to rank the quarterbacks that they could have gotten over the last 18 months, Skylar Thompson would probably be like 18th or 19th on my list. Mike White would be 18th, 19th, or 20th. You think of all the names that they passed on over the last 2 years. And to me, this goes back to last year. 18 months ago in March, when they quickly pounced on Mike White, I don't want to say I told you so. I hate saying I told you so, but I said the minute he was signed, this was a mistake. The body of work was not good enough. Andy Dalton and Minshew were much better options, and they were affordable options. Andy Dalton was 2 years, $10 million. Look how he tore up the Las Vegas secondary playing for a Carolina team that doesn't have nearly the offensive talent that Miami has. Jameis Winston was an option. You could have gone out and traded a conditional 5th-round pick for Justin Fields to protect yourself. All it took from Pittsburgh was a conditional 2025 6th-round pick. So if you're going to trade a 2nd for Josh Rosen, you're telling me you can't trade a conditional 5th for Justin Fields just to protect yourself? How in the world could they have left themselves in this position? It was criminally negligent to leave themselves in this position at quarterback. They have totally, I would say, misidentified who could be a starter if Tua were healthy. They've just done poor evaluation at the position, and it's shared blame, I think, between Greer and McDaniel, because obviously Greer's not picking a backup quarterback without McDaniel being on board. Am I being too harsh on them?
No, you're not being too harsh. You bank on development of quarterbacks, and you bank on the development of Skyler. Obviously, based on this one game that we've seen him, it wasn't enough. But it doesn't matter right now, Barry, because you know what? Skyler's got some broken ribs. And it is going to be a miracle if he's going to be able to get on the field. When you have broken ribs, the biggest thing is the breathing. And even though Mike McDaniel labeled him day-to-day, I have a hard time believing that they're going to go into practice on Thursday, the beginning of their work week for the Tennessee Titans, and say, hey, Skyler, even though you're probably going to have to wear a flak jacket or rib jacket, even though you're struggling to breathe, we're going to put you into the game, especially based on how you performed last week. Right now, I believe that this team is probably in the hands of Tyler Huntley, or as they call him, Snoop, and either Tim Boyle. Now, the question is, which one do you go with? It clearly seemed to me that the team, which includes the coach, Mike McDaniel, is favoring Tyler Huntley. Now, the challenges with that is doesn't know the offense, doesn't know the terminology, doesn't know the audibles, doesn't know anything. And how quickly can you adjust, create a game plan, simplify a game plan to get him out there on the field? Now,
isn't that Mike McDaniel's responsibility, Omar? Isn't that Frank Smith's responsibility? Dumb down the playbook if you have to. But Tyler Huntley is clearly the better quarterback. Look at career body of work. Tim Boyle, one of the worst quarterbacks of the modern era based on numbers. That's not a subjective comment. You look at his numbers, he's one of the worst quarterbacks to play an extended period of time in the league this century, as opposed to Tyler Huntley, who at the very least has been mediocre, average, had some good moments. And listen to what Calais Campbell said to your question today. You have the intelligence to ask Calais about playing with Tyler Huntley and to ask what he brings. And he mentioned the escapability, the elusiveness, the ability to run. And then he pointed out what every Dolphins fan knows, which is with the speed at receiver outside, having a quarterback who can run is an asset that this team has not had and obviously can be a huge one now. So to me, you give Tyler Huntley a package of a couple dozen plays that he can handle. You allow him to run when the pocket breaks down, and that gives you an element that you haven't had for several years. And to me, anything that Huntley gives you, as long as it's not turnover prone, is going to be better than what we've seen from Tim Boyle as a body of work throughout his career.
It wasn't that bad against Seattle.
No, he wasn't that bad against Seattle, but he's been an awful quarterback throughout his career. 4 touchdowns, 12 picks, 56 passer rating, hasn't done anything anywhere. And I can't even believe that they went back to him as opposed to bringing back Mike White of Buffalo's practice squad. How bad must Mike White have been in the closed practices for them to go to Tim Boyle over Mike White? It's stunning to me. And also, I want to ask you this question. Did Skyler do enough where you would even keep him around at this point? How about just reaching an injury settlement, something that Chris Kaufman suggested on Twitter, going back to Mike White and having Mike White, Huntley as your quarterbacks, forget Tim Boyle, or maybe keep Boyle around for a week, but certainly never start him again. How about that idea? What has Skyler Thompson done if he's going to miss a week or two to even take up a spot on the 53 at this point?
Well, clearly, I think he's headed to the injury reserve. That gives him 4 weeks to heal up. Takes ribs about 6. I believe Jay Cutler got back in 3 and was playing with a flak jacket and playing hot potato with the football just because he didn't want anybody touching him in his retirement season. Barry, I think Alec Ingle put it best, and I think he was saying it. We don't want anybody to come in here and be our savior or just hold us down until Tua comes back. But realistically, Barry, that's exactly what they need. They need somebody to come in here, help them win 1 or 2 games until Tua comes back, sort of keep the season on track, keep the season from tanking and circling the drain. And I think players put it best. Whereas, and I wrote a column about this last week. You have been here before, Dolphin fans. You have been in the land of mediocrity and bad quarterback play. And you have been covering and following teams that have had to be led by their run game and their defense. And that's exactly who this Dolphins team is right now. Whether Tyler Huntley is going to be getting the start and scrambling. And I'm still a little uncertain about that because I know the ego of coaches, and it's tremendously challenging and of all the coaches that I do know Mike McDaniel can minimize his ego, but it's tremendously challenging for them to take all of their playbook and just throw it out and say, okay, here goes 25 plays that you can run, Tyler. And everything that we've worked and we've built around and built on, and he talked about a little bit about the RPO. And yeah, they're probably going to lean on the RPO plays. They're probably going to lean on their play action, their rollouts, which is probably what they were going to use with Skylar last week. And look how that worked. So can you dumb down, and I hate using that term, or simplify the offense enough for a guy who got here a week ago on tomorrow and is learning the playbook and learning the hand actions and learning the audibles and learning the jet sweeps and the cheat motions and hot routes? Can you dumb it down so that you could play a game on Monday and not have it absolutely simplified? But keep in mind also, you got to work on chemistry with Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, Julian Hill, Tanner Connor. These running backs, I don't think running backs, because most of those passes are checkdowns. But that doesn't happen overnight, Barry, but here we are.
Right. Well, you have an extra day of practice. The guys can come in with Tyler Huntley tomorrow. There's nothing to keep them from coming in and working an extra day. But to me, when the alternative is Tim Boyle, you have to make it work with Tyler Huntley, no matter how few plays he's capable of running, no matter how few plays he's learned in the offense. You've simply got to make it work with him. Here's what scares me beyond the quarterback play, Omar. And I know one of these things is a pet peeve of yours. 2 areas where the Dolphins were good last year, running the ball, per carry average, best in the league last year at 5.0. This year, 3.7, 27th. We're going to get to that in a second. The other area, and this is the area that I know is troubling you, and it's bothering me to an extent as well. Run defense. Last year allowed 3.8 per carry, 7th in the league. This year, 4.5 per carry. That's too much. That's tied for 18th through 21st in the league. So it's basically bottom 10 to 12 in the league. As Calais Campbell said today, the run defense hasn't been awful, but he said, obviously, we've had stretches where we haven't done well enough. Obviously, the Cook run against Buffalo, Seattle ran the ball down their throat once early, once late in the game on Sunday. So what you need to rescue a team that is missing its starting quarterback is a top running game and a very good run defense. And right now they're below average in both. And who's to blame for that? The person who put the roster together, Chris Greer, unfortunately.
Interesting, Barry. I mean, coming for the jugular.
Is any of this unfair? Yeah.
No. Primarily because we went into the offseason, you lost Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis. Not just one, but you lost 2. And you hired a bunch of journeymen who are generally not here. And then you added Calais Campbell last minute as like a throw-in after, certain media members, not calling any names, but basically begged you to do it because what you had was not going to work.
Mark Kelly, if memory serves, might have suggested that. Yeah.
And thank God you did sign Calais. But right now, for you to play a respectable defense, Calais would have to play 40 to 50 snaps a game. And I just don't think that that's possible. Not even
Hand is playing more than him. Deshaun Hand played more snaps because you can't expect Calais Campbell at 38 to be able to play even 70% of the snaps. He's barely playing 50 at this point. He's probably capable of more, but I understand Austin Clark and Anthony Weaver don't want to overwork him. But to me, I know run defense concerns you. It certainly concerns me because they're not as dominant in that area. But as far as physicality on both sides of the ball, Omar, the thing that worries me the most is the trouble they're having with the outside zone run. Why were they able to be so effective on the perimeter last year? I know it's been pointed out on Twitter by people this week, Kyle Krabs and others, that what's killing them is runs to the perimeter. The outside zone runs have not worked behind both tackles. Yeah. Receivers haven't blocked effectively. Tight ends haven't blocked effectively. They're a bottom third in the league in that area. Why is that failing?
I think we are taking a snapshot of something that probably has to take a long lens to. From this standpoint, who is your best outside zone runner? I know Devon Achane is phenomenal and he's got the yards per carry average higher than, rest in peace. Damn it. Who just died, Barry? Mercury Morris, who actually held the record before Devon Achane took it over. But Raheem Mostert is your best outside zone runner. And Raheem Mostert is a Pro Bowl back. I know every Dolphins fan wants to go with the young guy. The young guy's better. The young guy's better. Raheem Mostert has been your top back and will probably continue to be your top back. Right now, he's out with a chest injury. That's unfortunate. Then you've got Teron Armstead playing with the shoulder injury, and now he's in the concussion protocol. That's not ideal. Here we go, another stack on the injuries on Teron. And you're not ready as an organization to turn it over to Patrick Paul, which I understand, especially when you're going into Seattle and you have to play mostly on a silent count. But here you are, you have a full week of practice, an extra day, you're at home. He's a second-round pick. It's time. But besides that, when you don't have Tua Tagovailoa back there at quarterback, and he has not been back there for, let's say, a game and a half, it's going to handcuff, especially when you're playing with with big deficits. It's going to force what you do as an offense. It's going to handcuff what you do from a play action standpoint. Hell, you're not even seeing Tyreek Hill. When has Tyreek Hill been a factor outside of the one catch that he caught against the Jacksonville Jaguars? This season, he is just not a factor. And when you look at what Justin Jefferson is able to do with the Minnesota Vikings, who probably have the hottest team in the NFL, with Sam Darnold as their quarterback, that looks like an alpha receiver, whereas Tyreek Hill has not looked like an alpha receiver this year. He's looked like a fast receiver who can outrun you, but where's the play-by-play impact that you've seen from Tyreek Hill throughout the first 2 years of his career? I
wanted to add this, Omar. I've never thought we'd see the day in the Mike McDaniel era where we are asking the question, why haven't they gotten the ball to Tyreek Hill more? But that was a question that was raised today, and it's been an issue the last two games. 5 targets on Sunday. That's not enough. And I know some fans at times have gotten tired of the wide receiver screens that haven't worked, but maybe you need more of a dose of those and just put your best blockers on those plays as lead blockers. I know.
No, Barry, I got you an even better solution. I'm sorry. Okay, Tyreek Hill needs to be your slot receiver, and Tyreek Hill needs to be running drag routes across the middle of the field, jet sweeps, everything in motion. Make it simplify. You can put somebody else on the field to be a deep threat. And I know Tyreek Hill can beat you deep and the game changes at the snap of a finger, but I would rather the ball in his hand on an every down basis. And to me, that means put him in as a slot receiver. Now, that certainly means that somebody else has to step up as a flanker, and I haven't seen that person on the roster yet. It's certainly not Braxton Berrios, who has made absolutely no impact outside of his, I believe it was a 46-yard punt return this year. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be eligible to come off the PUP list after the Titans game. So he's going to get some work, get some practice. If he looks healthy, doesn't suffer a setback, there's a possibility he could be activated the next week. But right now, we're just throwing stuff against the wall, trying to figure out if it's going to stick, Barry. And right now, especially receiver, one of the deepest positions on the team happens to be the thinnest right now. They don't even have Grant Dubose anymore. Robbie Chosen is gone. Sayonara, he's been cut. And you're left with Eric Uzukama, who's battling a Lisfranc injury and he's battling plantar fasciitis. He's not healthy, but he's being put out there on the field, which is great. But a not healthy, not good receiver, it's a recipe for disaster, Barry. The question is,
Yeah, I mean, they left themselves in such a mess, receiver. 3 for 14 this year on targets to receivers not named Tyreek and Jalen. And then you combine that with the fact that the lowest combined yardage games for Jalen and Tyreek in their 2+ years as teammates have been the last 2 games, 65 yards, 66 yards. And how about this, Omar, too? This is also really bothering me. Wasn't tight end supposed to be their most improved position on the team? They've got next to nothing from the position. Jonnu played well in game 2. Durham Smythe is off to a poor start. They very quietly moved Julian Hill against Durham Smythe ahead of Durham Smythe. Julian Hill played more.
Tanner Connor started last week too.
Yes, Julian Hill played more. Right, and I want to mention also Durham Smythe played less than Tanner Connor now in 2 of the last 3 games, or I should say less than Julian Hill in 2 of the last 3 games. Julian Hill, as everyone knows, 5 penalties and just 100 or so snaps this year, so he's not seized on his opportunity, even though he's a physical blocker and even though he seemed an improved player throughout the offseason, he hasn't seized on his opportunity. We're seeing uncharacteristic things from Durham Smythe. We saw the 2 drops in the opener. It would have been a difficult touchdown catch in Seattle for Durham Smythe, but it was one that was makeable. He had the ball in his hands, obviously. It came out when he fell to the turf in the end zone in Seattle. And then Smith, I don't necessarily blame Jonnu Smith for that. We're not seeing how much separation he's getting on every play, so it's hard to judge how much is Jonnu, how much is play calling. But wouldn't you like to see a little more creative use of Jonnu Smith, especially on Sunday when nothing was working? Give him the ball on a handoff. Give him the ball in a reverse. Have him do something on his DAC ability. Right?
Absolutely. Give him the ball.
Why haven't we seen more of that?
Running the ball in the rounds. It's yes. I have made it part of my career. I can't remember which coach it was. I think it might have been the great Bobby Bowden, who basically encouraged me not to question play calling as a media member from this standpoint. I don't know all the factors. I don't know all the variables. I don't know who had a bad week of practice. I don't know, the complications based on matchups of this player. His strength is this and that. So I don't know all of the factors. So I've made it a habit not to question play calling. Styles, approaches, game plans, but play calling is a no-no. But what I will say is I have not liked what I've seen from Mike McDaniel and the play calling in the first 3 games. It's not just the last 2 losses. The game plan just doesn't sit well with me from the standpoint I know what this team can do. I know most of their plays, and that's what you come up with as a game plan. It has left me a little bit disappointed. Let's do this, Barry. We could talk about all the disappointment, all the struggles of this 1-2 franchise, but the reality is the Dolphins are breaking in their 3rd quarterback, if not their 4th quarterback. Who a guy more than likely if it's Tyler Snoop Huntley, who's been with the team all of 10 days before he's going to be starting the game. That's not easy to survive, but it's doable. The question is, who needs to step up more? Now, I'm not saying put on a cape, but who needs to step up more and do more in order to take more of the responsibility and more of the burden on their shoulders as opposed to putting it on Tyler Huntley's?
It has to be their best players, the guys who are considered their best players, elite players in the league.
High-paid players. Is that what you're saying, Barry?
It has to start with exactly highest paid players, elite players. It's a very simple list. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Ramsey, who's played well since he struggled in the first game. Jalen Phillips, not one of their highest paid players yet, but he'd be the first to tell you he wasn't great in the second game. He probably was not thrilled with his game in game 3, right? And Teron Armstead, who has, in fairness, as usual, battled injury problems. But you need a dominant Teron Armstead if he gets out of concussion protocol and he's out there. So I would start with those 5, and I would say with Hill and Waddle. Yes, I would say with Hill and Waddle has to be a joint effort with McDaniel. McDaniel has to find creative ways to get both of them the ball. But Hill and Waddle, once you made the decision to construct your roster with 2 receivers, close to the top of your payroll, and you've sacrificed building physical lines as a result, you've opted to continue to be a finesse speed team and not a physical team that's equipped to win in December and January in cold circumstances. Once that decision's been made and that ship has sailed, they've made that decision, then you better maximize your 2 weapons with Hill and Waddle, and that starts with them, and it starts with McDaniel. If they don't combine for at least 15 touches, and I'm thinking more along the lines of 20, But if they don't combine for 15 touches going forward, there's something wrong, even if some of them have to be on handoffs, which I know would leave them more vulnerable to injury.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I think a little bit more of a burden should be put on the run game and the offensive line. Yes, you're probably not who you thought you were at the beginning of the season. You're probably going to have to morph and change your identities, but that's what good coaches do. If you're a better inside zone running team, then run the inside zone. Devon Achane's right now the leading receiver, leading rusher on this team. He's got 60 touches of the football. That the question is, how much more can he endure? Do you have a second guy greased up, ready to go? Right now, Julian Wright is got 21 rushing yards on 7 carries. Jeff Wilson is your probably second best back with a 5 yards per carry average, but it's not really impressive. To me, it comes down to what else do you have in your bag? Like, what relief pitchers do you have? Because right now your starters aren't doing anything. That's why I thought Tanner Connors, his elevation to a starting role, that was probably something that had more to do with Skylar Thompson's chemistry with Tanner Connor. They've just always had some synergy that benefited them from rookies and carried on. Unfortunately, it wasn't showing during the game, and probably contributed to their struggle. So, Barry, right now you're at a point where you're in desperation mode. To me, it's also on the defense. As much as they've held this team together and made the scores of games, opponents, with the exception of Buffalo, respectable, I would argue to you that they won the Jacksonville Jaguars game. They are completing, they're allowing opponents to complete 62% of their third down opportunities. But in the red zone, they're allowing 85% of their opportunities in the red zone to turn into touchdowns. That's an unhealthy stat. It's got to dial it down. Got to dial down the run. So I'm expecting a better performance from Anthony Weaver, and I believe it was Calais who said today what Weaver's done is that he's shown the defensive players all of the breakdowns that they've had, clip by clip, approved a lot that it was somebody trying to do more than what was their assignment. This is a team that they talk about trusting one another, do your 1 of 11. And unfortunately, that's how defenses get compromised in the breakdowns. We saw the 49-yard run from Cook. That was David Long shooting a gap he wasn't supposed to. Who was it that also got beat doing something else that they weren't supposed to be doing? It just happens, Barry. That's the reality of the situation. The question is, do they have enough with all the injuries that are beginning to mount? We saw David Long not finish the game with a hamstring injury.
Correct. Kendall Fuller's in protocol. Yeah, I would say this with their defense. Once they're a healthy unit, once they get Bradley Chubb back, hopefully at some point in October, to me, they can be a good defense. I don't think they have enough to be a dominant defense against really good offenses. I think they can be good enough, but I tell you what they can be. They should be able to be a dominant defense even without Bradley Chubb, maybe even without David Long against the next 3 offenses they face. Tennessee, New England, Indianapolis, bottom 10 offenses, all of them in the league, all 2 of them breaking in young quarterbacks, obviously with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. We know what Jacoby Brissett is. Okay at times, not very good at other times. So there's no reason that this should not be a dominant defensive unit these next 3 games, even without Chubb, and even if Anthony Walker and some of Duke Riley have to replace David Long if he's limited over these next 3 games. But as far as them being able to go in and stop the league's best offenses at full strength, I'm dubious because of the loss of Wilkins. I just don't know if they have enough at corner. As far as number 4 corner or even Kohu. Now, Kohu's credit obviously had the pick on Sunday. So those would be my concerns. And I want to go back to offense really quickly with you. I know what you were saying about you don't like to question individual play calls. And I've made the point that I don't think McDaniel's play calling in general is a problem. But I know there were a couple of things that frustrate us on Sunday that we'd be remiss not to mention. When they were having success with the inside zone running in the second quarter, it was then 3 straight passes, and the next drive, 3 straight passes. How do you explain that? How can you justify that? And then obviously the last 2 plays of the first half, which I know you ranted about on Twitter. What in the world was that? Why no Hail Marys? Why did Jalen Waddle run out of bounds? What was that, Omar Kelly?
Mike McDaniel explained it as if they were playing for a penalty so that they can get a field goal at the end. Obviously, and then we went and we looked over the all 22 as a media contingent, because I saw it on the field, and on the final play where Tyler's scrambling out of the pocket and rolling right, he only had one option, and that was Jalen Waddle. And then Jalen Waddle, for some reason, ran out of bounds voluntarily. Nobody pushed him. He just ran the route and ran out of bounds. Didn't even stay inside and keep it alive, because if he did, maybe Tyler would have had an option, and then Tyler takes the sack. So to me, that's just dumb football. And, and I'll call it what it is. I'm sorry. There's no play design for Jalen Waddle to run out of bounds in that situation. That's just dumb football. And you're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of that from the Miami Dolphins. And they can't beat themselves. This is not a team where they're talented enough, especially not without Tua, to beat themselves. Now, let's address Tua.
And still pre-snap penalties, a huge problem. Still bottom 2 in the league in pre-snap penalties. Offensive holding, bottom 2 of the league in that. And then whoever thought we'd be talking about a Mike McDaniel, Tyreek Hill team that was last in the league in scoring. I know it's only 3 games. They played 5.5 of their 12 quarters without their starting quarterback. But to be in this predicament with the league's most tepid offense, pretty sobering for a team that's really built around scoring and finesse and explosiveness and big plays.
Yeah, it's certainly humbling. Let's address, we've got 3 players in the concussion protocol. Clearly, one of them is way more high profile than the other 2. I think there's a chance that Kendall Fuller probably clears concussion protocol in time enough to play on Monday. I've seen it done before. Wouldn't be a surprise. And then Teron Armstead is battling. He got stabbed in the eye with something. I believe there was a black eye situation. He's in the concussion protocol. It'll be interesting to see if he's going to be able to clear by Monday. What I will tell you is Tua is going to see a neurologist this week, going to be checked. More than likely, and I'm just being honest with you folks, more than likely the neurologist is going to give him the green light when he comes off IR to return to the game. He's probably going to get checked now, probably going to get checked one more time before he goes back in. Every whisper is that Tua is impatiently awaiting his opportunity to regain his starting spot. Whether or not that's a wise idea or not our decision. But we'll see how that happens.
And what's encouraging is that, in spite of the fact that obviously it's a serious concern long-term for him, especially if he gets any more, what's encouraging is that he feels good. There's been no indication that there have been ongoing symptoms. So that is encouraging. And I don't anticipate, from speaking to several neurologists, Omar, over the past couple of weeks, I don't anticipate anyone saying you shouldn't go back and play, because I don't think we're at that point. And frankly, it would probably take multiple more concussions for even some neurologists to give him that advice. But it is important for him to sit out this 4-week period, because there have been medical studies that show that especially during the first 15 days after a concussion, you are far more likely to get another concussion, and the consequence of that concussion could be far greater. So to me, putting him on IR was a no-brainer, but people should also be prepared for this. As I tweeted yesterday, if Tua has subsequent concussions, the time that he's going to be out is only going to get longer and longer. There's not going to be any quick return from a Tua concussion. We can have this discussion on another show down the road, but to me, because of Tua's health, they now are in a position where they basically need 2 starting quarterbacks. I don't know how they afford that. They're probably going to have to draft one. They're going to have to.
It's called the draft, Gary. This organization
that long term. Yeah, that long term, and we'll get into this more at length on a future show. That long term now has become a priority and a big problem, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we will be here on Dolphins in Depth later on this week. We've got a Monday night game, so everything is pushed back a day here on the podcast as the Dolphins practice. They have Wednesday off and then return to practice on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, leading up to that kickoff against the Monday night kickoff against the Tennessee Titans. On that note, we are out, and we will see you on Thursday.